Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on Adobe Live. I hope everyone's having a good day so far. How are we doing? How are we doing? If you have not already joined the Adobe Live community, make sure you do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Join us over on Behance. Follow us at Instagram, or even at Adobe Live on Instagram for the latest streams, updates, and many, many more. We have a very special guest today. I am here with Aaron Nace. Say hi, Aaron.
Hey, Storm. How you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing really well. It's so good to see everyone here joining us in the chat. I'm really excited for today's broadcast. It's going to be so much fun.
Hello, everyone in chat. Actually, I should say hello to Oliver, Clever Devlin, Umacorn over on Behance, and Jack Watson and Drew. Hello, and happy Valentine's Day. So, for those of you who don't know, Aaron shouldn't need too much introduction because over on his own personal YouTube channel with just over 2 million subscribers, Aaron is a fantastic photographer and educator and has been helping clearly more than 2 million people around the world get to grips with Photoshop. So if you are not already following him on his various different platforms, I highly recommend you do, because that's something we're going to be diving into a little bit. As someone said, me too, Carol and Marsha. Hello.
Hello.
That's something we're going to be diving into a little bit today. But before we get started, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself? First,
Yeah,
Aaron, for those who don't know you.
For sure. So I started my photography journey, let's see, close to 15 years ago. I started out as a travel photographer, and then I got really into doing self-portraiture through a 365-day project where I took a self-portrait every day for a year. And in that project, I wanted to make really interesting images, but I had very limited resources. So I turned to Photoshop to help me make more interesting photos. And through that year, got comfortable in Photoshop, got comfortable with photography. And then after that, applied the skills that I had learned to working with other people and creating sets and fantastic environments. And along the way, people asked, hey, how'd you do this in Photoshop? And I thought it was a really great opportunity to share everything that I had done over that time. So I started my YouTube channel. It's been almost 10 years, actually over 10 years now. I started in 2011, so it's been over 10 years now.
Wow.
And yeah, tell me about it. And teaching Photoshop and photography in Lightroom and other creative programs. And it's just been an absolute joy to be able to turn a passion into a career and connect with so many fantastic people all around the world. So I'm really excited to be here and happy to answer any questions about the art side of things, the business side of things, social media, building a YouTube channel, whatever you guys have questions. And of course, Photoshop, my one true love, Photoshop.
Speaking of Valentine's Day,
and
yeah, I have to admit you are living the dream, turning a passion into a career like that. And the fact that people have turned to you to find out your expertise, we are so very lucky to have you. And it looks like someone found you in your Flickr era, which is incredible.
Amazing. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Yeah, early days on Flickr, man. So much fun. It's really just kind of been an absolute blast to be able to just, create art and make a living out of it, and it's been, kind of a dream come true, like a fairy tale story in a lot of ways.
I wish that for all of our creators that are tuning in with us here today. Now, I did mention that you have a very impressive YouTube channel and your own website called Phlearn.com. Can you tell us a bit about it and how it's evolved since you first started it?
Yeah, definitely. So I started Phlearn again on YouTube. That was in 2011. And I just wanted to kind of share everything that I had learned. It was kind of the early days for video online education. And, Photoshop back then was as we all know, anyone who's used Photoshop, it's such a powerful program, and learning how to use it can be like, okay, what does this do? What does that do? And because I had studied Photoshop in college and then used it quite a bit with my own photography, I felt like it was just the kind of the perfect way to teach it. There was a lot of Photoshop books out at the time, but in terms of videos, there wasn't a lot of great video resources. Nowadays on YouTube, there's so many great video resources, but back in 2011, it was, I just thought it was like the perfect way to teach Photoshop. I love watching videos, so I wanted to produce videos teaching Photoshop and photography. So we started off just making little videos on YouTube, and I actually started off making a video every single day, and I did that for a few years. And that's what really got me that's what really got me going. I think maybe the YouTube algorithm picked up on that. So the more often you post definitely helps when it comes to social media and things like that.
100%. I can see we've got Phlearn up on the screen now, and Jack has very kindly over on the YouTube and on the Behance chat dropped a link for you guys to check it out yourselves. I know when I was at school, if I had a resource like this, I would be in a different place right now. So you guys are very lucky to have this resource right now. But speaking of having tutorials and things like that, maybe we should get started on the project. So what have you got for us today?
Let's get started. I'm super excited. So we have a composite image that I did. So I would say that in terms of like my artistic career, I'm probably best known for compositing. And basically that's when you take different photographs and put them together and try to make it realistic. And I've always been attracted to like the fantasy conceptual fine art side of things. So that's always been my passion, whether I'm doing photography or just strictly Photoshop projects. I like to create something that just kind of looks like magical, and that's what we're going to be looking at today as well. So there we go. Are you able to see my screen here in Photoshop?
Yep, we can see.
Fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. I zoomed in a little bit just to start our broadcast, but as we can see, this is the image that we're going to be working with today. So we're going to start off with, if anyone hasn't seen or worked with like a complicated composite that has a lot of different layers, we're going to go through and start off by turning these layers off and on and kind of talking about structure and organization and how to actually build something like this, because this is made of many different photographs. So let me go ahead and just bring my Finder window open so you guys can kind of get an idea of the different photographs that are used to create this image. So you can see there's actually 15 different photos that are used to create this underwater image here. So as I scroll through them, you can kind of see here each of these photographs, and a lot of these are just stock photos that you can find on, like Adobe stock or free stock image websites. So these are the images that I used. You can see there's the little girl that's in the center of the image, and all of these images, while they are all underwater, they don't necessarily match the same like color and lighting of the final composite. So basically these are what make up the image. So we're going to go through and kind of like turn layers off and on here in Photoshop and show you basically how something like this is actually made. All right, we ready to get into it?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, so we're going to start off, and I'm just going to zoom in just a little bit so we can actually see a little bit closer here. We're going to start off by turning these layers off at the very top and opening up our background layer, and then kind of going all the way to the very, very background. So this is just here we go. So you can see this is just like one background image, and even in this layer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about layers and organization and things like that, because it's, as we get creative with Photoshop, we can do all kinds of cool stuff. So this is basically just one photograph. We can see right down here on the very bottom of my background in the layer stack, we're starting off with a single photograph, and this is what makes up like the background of our image. So from there, we add like a vignette and a couple different like lights. And this is very simple, just using basically curves adjustment layers here in Photoshop. And I'm able to make areas brighter and areas darker, adding a little highlight in the center, and that's going to be right behind the subject. So we can see that's the background basically. Now we have another layer here. We're going to go ahead and turn that on. And this is like a cave that we're going to make visible. And this basically makes up the background. And we have a few of these different caves. So this rock here, we've got one on the left and then one on the right there. And let's just show you here in the Finder window the original image, just so you can get an idea of what we were working with. So this is actually the original photograph that makes up the ceiling of the cave. I used just this area right here next to the diver and rotated that horizontally, and then did some color work and some light work to make sure that it looks actually natural. So you can see, starting off with these type of like stock photos, that's what's going to make up like the roof of this image, like the roof of the cave.
Oh, wow.
All right. Yeah. So you can rotate things, you can color things, you can kind of transform objects, and just kind of create anything you can think of, really. And I'm going to show you guys how to do it in just a few minutes. So we're going to turn this image of the coral here on the left-hand side. So we'll just turn that on. You can see on and off, and you can see it's kind of like behind the fish there. And then we have a stingray back here that we've added as well. And all of this is just in the very background. So you can see anytime I create a composite like this, it's what I like to do is layer my layers in groups, just like you would see them like if you were looking through a book. So whatever's closest to you, like closest to the camera, closest to the viewer, that should be on the very top. So I've called that foreground. Anything that's in the middle should be, you know, like in the middle of your layer stack, and then the background should be on the bottom of your layer stack. So basically, when you think about like layers and groups and organization, things that are farther away from the viewer should be lower in the layers, and things that are closer should be higher up. So think about layers as like one stacks on top of the other. So, you know, everything in the background is here on the bottom of my layer stack. Let's just go ahead and close that. And then we go through the midground and then up to the foreground.
That makes a lot of sense. We actually do have a quick question from Marsha here, and I was actually wondering this as well. As you're compositing things, Marsha asks us if you do a sketch beforehand.
I definitely start with a sketch. Yeah, that's always something I start with. And honestly, nowadays, I use artificial intelligence to do a lot of my sketching because AI is a fantastic tool. Tools like Midjourney and Adobe Firefly, they're just so powerful. And you can generate a lot of different iterations in a very short period of time. So I'll generally start with an idea that I have and then try to like create a concept using artificial intelligence. And then I'll use that concept as a rough guide for how I'm going to wind up making my image. So all of these, everything in this composite, let's just turn everything back on so you guys can see this. This is 100% a photograph. Like this is, you know, you can see the young girl there. Like everything in this image is a photograph. There's no artificial intelligence at all in this composite, but I did use artificial intelligence to help me come up with like the composition and the overall like like the overall kind of like light quality and composition, but from the artificial intelligence I basically built this composite image using that as a reference. Back before artificial intelligence existed as a tool, then it was all just sketches. It was, you know, quick sketches on a piece of paper or an iPad or something like that. That's a great question.
To be able to translate that into this sort of finished product is really incredible. Really like that. And then seeing a lot of people think that your organization is the way to go. I definitely need to take note of that because I'm very messy with my own layers.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, you know, you come to appreciate organization, especially if you have to share something with team members or like, you know, project managers or clients and things like that. You want them to be able to open this up, you know, and see exactly what you're working with. So we're going to continue to kind of go through this, but that's kind of the big takeaway is the farther stuff, you know, away from the camera, just put that in the background, and then the closer stuff, put that above it in the foreground. So we can see we started with a background here. We have a little bit more light, and that's going to be behind our subject. And then let's go ahead and make our subject visible. So you can see each of these is just layer by layer. Now with our subject, let's go ahead and zoom into the subject here. And we're just going to turn off and on. You can see in this case, we have bubbles. There we go. These are the bubbles that she's kind of breathing out. So I have everything layered and grouped and named here. So we can go ahead and just turn those bubbles off. Let's go here. I wanted her hair to kind of look like it's floating away in the, you know, underwater. So So we're going to go ahead and turn
Mm.
that additional hair off. You can turn the girl off, and then this is like the rock that she's standing on. So let's go ahead and turn that on, and then we're going to turn the girl on as well. And then I'm going to just go into this girl group here, and then kind of talk about how we're able to cut her out and match the color and the light so she actually looks like she's in this environment. Let's turn the hair on as well. Okay, so as we can see, we're in this group. This is just our subject here. And we have an image of, you can see this is the original photograph that we're working with. And then all of these different layers that are clipped to that subject. You can see they have this little down arrow. And these are the things that are going to help us change the light balance. So we're going to be using levels to change whether it's light or dark. And we're going to be using color balance to change the colors. So let's go ahead and turn those off. I'm just going to turn these layers off. And we can see this is the color of the original photograph. Let's turn the shadow off. And I'm going to hold shift and disable that layer mask. So we can see within this composite is the original photo. The entire original photo does exist within this composite. You can see this is straight out of camera. This is actually a stock photograph that I found, you know, on a free stock image website. So to get a person like this, you know, like obviously she just looks like she's walking outside, not an underwater image at all. So the first thing we do is cut our subject out of the background. So that's over here. You can see I have my subject image, and then we have our layer mask. I'm going to go ahead and enable our layer mask. Now, to get from, you know, this image to just your subject, it's actually incredibly easy. All you have to do is click on your layer. And if you have a person, you can go to your contextual taskbar and click on select subject right up here on the very top left. So just go to select subject. There we go.
That function.
And it's so handy. There we go. So you can see it's made a selection out of my subject. Everything looks really good. Even the hair, surprisingly, it works very well. So it's selected our subject out. And then from there, all you have to do is click on this layer mask icon. I've already made a layer mask, so I'll just enable mine. But once you have your selection, all you have to do is add a layer mask, and it's going to make sure that everything else is invisible and only the subject is visible. So we're just making a quick layer mask out of that selection, and then all of a sudden our subject is cut out. All right, so we can see as of like right now, she's cut out, but doesn't look like she's in this environment at all, right? Like it doesn't look real. So this is kind of like one of the, you know, one of the goals of compositing in Photoshop is how do you take a stock photograph or, you know, something that you have photographed on your own and actually make it like fit in the scene. So the first thing that we're going to do, let's just turn this layer on. We're just going to work with the light levels. And I'm using like literally a levels adjustment layer to make some parts of the image brighter and some parts of it darker. I'll show you how to do this in just a little bit. For now, we're just going to turn some layers off and on as a little kind of expose. Next, we're going to just lower the contrast and brighten up the top of the image just a little bit more. And then we're going to color balance it. And this is, again, this is right here. This is the magic here. It's just a color balance adjustment layer. And it just changes the color to make it look like she's actually in this scene. So we can see we've gone from the before to the after. Now, everything that we're doing here in Photoshop is completely non-destructive. I can turn these off at any time, and I have my original photograph that I can reference. So these layers just stack on top of the original photograph, okay? And we're using levels adjustment layers and then a color balance adjustment layer as well. And these are clipped to my subject. So if you've never used a clipping mask before, they're incredibly helpful. Basically, they allow these adjustment layers, like the color balance and the levels, they allow them to only affect the layer that they're pointing to. So you can see these little down arrows here, and they're pointing directly to my subject. So I'm changing the levels and changing the color just on our subject here. There we go. And let's go ahead and turn that on. Now, the next thing we need to do is add a shadow. So we've got a shadow. This is this layer here directly underneath our subject. And I just drew that like with a brush tool, basically. And then we're going to go ahead and turn on the hair. There we go. And this hair, surprisingly, I'll show you guys here in the, here we go. In the stock photographs, let me go ahead and find the image of the hair. So actually, I got the hair from this stock photo. I just wanted,
clever.
yeah, because I wanted it to look like the hair was kind of like floating in space. So I found a stock photograph of someone jumping where the hair kind of like looks like it's floating a little bit. And I was able to cut this hair out, again, using select subject and refine edge. I was able to cut the hair out right here. And then that is exactly what makes up, let's go ahead and zoom in so you can see it. That's exactly what makes up this hair over here and up here on the top. This is literally the same hair on the top as it is on the bottom over there. There's just been flipped and transformed. So you can see that's what kind of makes it look like the hair is kind of like floating in this space. It's hair from a different photograph.
Very clever. Penny agrees. We have a question from Casa Jaguar, mentioning that you have started using, where you started sketching and then you started integrating AI into your workflow. Casa Jaguar asks, how has integrating AI techniques into your designing process transformed your creative approach?
Honestly, it's made everything just faster and easier. Like for an image like this, for instance, traditionally I would just sketch it, like, and I'm not a very great artist. So it would literally just be stick figures and I'd put someone in the center and draw some things around there. But using artificial intelligence, I'm able to create a variation that includes like light and color and composition. And artificial intelligence, one thing that it gets really, really good is color and composition. And I find that using those as references, it helps me work a lot faster and work towards something that I know I'm going to really like. Now, before I used artificial intelligence, I would actually reference photographs quite a bit. And this is very common in the photography and in the art industry, where you find a piece of art, maybe it's a painting, maybe it's a photograph, maybe it's a print, like some piece of art that you like, and kind of dissect, like, what do I like about this? Is it the color that I like? Is it the lighting that I like? Is it the composition that I like? And then let's say it's the composition, then you can try to like recreate a similar composition using completely different elements. So you wind up with a picture that doesn't look anything like the original, but the composition, you're using it as a guide. You're using it as a reference to kind of like help you create a composition. Because a piece of work like this, as you can see, let's just go ahead and turn everything on again. This is created completely from scratch. All of these are completely separate images and, they can be moved around. Like the entire subject layer, I can move this around. Like you can see here, let me just turn off snapping here. So I can move my subject anywhere I want to in this scene. So when we're creating images like this in Photoshop, it's much different from like photography where you're capturing what exists. In this case, you're literally placing everything where you want it. I could make the subject smaller. I could make the subject larger. Now she looks like she's a little bit farther away. I can make her a little bit larger. Actually, I kind of like it now that she's a little farther away. So that's where artificial intelligence can really help out when it comes to like composition and getting an idea, like moving through ideas really quickly. And from there, I'll translate things into like conceptual images. So just like this. Great question.
Very, very good question. Thank you for that, Casa Jaguar. So where are we at now? We've gotten to the light. We've done the subject.
Yep. I'm going to turn a couple layers off. We're going to go to the bubbles. So I'll just show you guys the image that I used for the bubbles here. And again, these are all stock photos. I got these for free online. So I just found a picture of a person underwater here.
I love this image.
Yeah, it's kind of intense. But I was able to take just these bubbles and kind of cut them out of the background. So we'll show you how to do that. It's actually incredibly simple. So we'll just take this image. I'm going to click and drag this right into Photoshop here. There we go. Perfect. And let's just make this a little bit larger. There we are. So let's just say I want just these bubbles. I'm going to just right click and rasterize this to make it a regular layer. Let's say I want just these bubbles in my image. Well, because these bubbles are lighter than the background, I can actually use a blending mode to make the bubbles visible and the background invisible. So we're going to go over here to our layer, okay? And I'm just going to change the blending mode where it says normal right now. We're just going to go down to where it says screen. All right, there we go. From normal down to screen. Now you can see the bubbles are much more visible, but the background is still kind of visible and we see the subject. So the first thing that we're going to do, let's just make this image a little bit darker. The reason we're going to make it darker is because we're in a screen blend mode right now, which makes light visible and dark invisible. So if I want to make my background invisible, I need to make my darks a little bit darker. Does that make sense? So when we make the darks darker, I'll just put this back to a normal layer here. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to use the levels and kind of like show you what this looks like with the regular image. So if I make my dark areas a little bit darker, there we go. You can see the bubbles are still visible, but now because this is completely black, if I use a screen blend mode, I'll just hit cancel there. If I use a screen blend mode, which hides the dark area and just makes the light visible, it's a way for me to very quickly cut out these bubbles. So let's try that again. I'm going to use my levels adjustment. We're going to make our darks darker. Fantastic. That looks really good. All right, let's hit OK. And we're just going to put a quick layer mask here on this. All right, let's go ahead and hit L for our level lasso tool, and we're just going to cut these bubbles out real quick and click on our layer mask. Fantastic. Okay, so here we can see basically I was able to take those bubbles and completely cut them out of the background really, really easily. Now we still have our original image. If I hold shift and click on this and then change it back to a normal blend mode, you can see I still have my original image if I want to, but if I change it back to screen and shift click there, now we just have those bubbles from that image. So it's a really cool way where you can basically take elements that you want. Let's say maybe we resize this. You can just take the elements that you want, cut them out and say, okay, all I need is bubbles coming up from the girl to make it look like she's underwater. And that's literally all there is to it.
That was way easier than I was expecting it to be.
So that's the exact process we use to create these bubbles.
You know, you've actually mentioned a few techniques already with the blending modes, clipping masks, and things like that. So what do you think are some of the most important techniques to kind of master if you're, the most useful ones in Photoshop for people watching?
Yeah, I would say for this type of compositing, I would say being able to cut things out of their background is very, very helpful. Like select subject and using layer masks and things like that. So making good selections and then turning those selections into layer masks to cut those objects out of the background. So I would say layer masking is a big one. Another big one is learning how to match light and color. And we're going to show you how to do that. We've got more examples on that here coming up real quick. And I'm going to show you like the most proper and the best workflow on how to do it. Really good question.
Great. That is great. Oh, Chris is saying, what a treat to catch a stream with Aaron. Lucky you.
Chris, good to see you.
Hi, Chris.
Alrighty. So we're moving on here. So we got a couple layers left. We have our background, our light, and our subject. Now you can see I can turn these layers off underneath, and here we have just our subject. We have our background and the light. So at any time I can go in and move these layers around. Next we have, let's go ahead and zoom out so you can see the entire image here. It's quite a large image. Next we have our midground. We'll go ahead and turn that on. And that is just made up of these rocks here up on the top. And these are the same caves that we showed you earlier. There we go. So we'll just turn this right here on the right-hand side. We have all these fish are cut out from the background. And we're going to be doing something similar to this in just a second. We have our rocks up here on the top. And that kind of creates our composition. And we can see we have a bit of depth in this image. Kind of looks like it's going back, into space here. Like that these caves here are farther away from the caves here in the foreground. So we're kind of creating the illusion of depth in this image as well. All right, next we're going to turn on our foreground and let's go ahead and go through those layers. We have like an additional coral that we've added here in the foreground. So that's that object there. We have another coral that we kind of just put over top of it, basically. We have some fish. More coral. Yeah, more coral. We have some fish here on the right-hand side. So we're just kind of putting those in as we'd like. We have a fish that I just put in front of everything. And so I'm, obviously these are all stock photos. So I'm trying to follow like this fish is close to the camera, right? So it's going to be a bit larger than these fish. And then we have some small fish. and then really small fish in the background. So we're using scale to create depth here. So the fish that are close to the camera are going to be larger. The fish that are farther away from the camera are going to be smaller. But we're also using light and color. So you can see this fish we color matched it, but you can see the dark levels of this fish are actually still quite dark. Whereas the fish in the background, the darks are actually a lot lighter. So by making the darks lighter, it basically makes it look like objects are farther away from the camera. Like we're looking through the water to be able to see those fish in the background. So we can see the objects closer to the camera are going to be the darkest, and farthest from the camera are going to be the lightest. And if you've ever been in the car, driving, you'll get some trees and then, like mountains in the background or something like that. Everything that's very far away from you tends to be a little bit lighter in color because you're actually like looking through air and, like water particles in the air, smoke, dust, haze, whatever it is. So, oftentimes like mountains, anything in the distance is just going to be a little bit lighter in color. As things move away from you, they get lighter and lighter and lighter. And the reason is because you're looking through atmosphere to be able to see them. So I'm basically kind of like doing the same thing in this image. Things that are closest to the camera, like this, that's dark. And thing that's farther away from the camera, it's a little bit lighter. And then even farther away from the camera is a little bit lighter because you're looking through the water to see it. Does
That's
that make
actually
sense?
very important. Yeah, it does. And it's very important to remember, actually, if you're trying to mimic realism, to remember how things actually work in real life. You may not think about that when you're just drawing or compositing, but to get that impression of the depth of field, these are some of the things you're going to have to pay attention to. So that's very good reminders for all of us, I think. But it's quite easy, like turning the layers off and on just to go through what you've done in a sense, because you've already done it now. And it sounds
Yes.
simple to us, but what happens when you come across a problem, when you get a bit of an art block and you're like, this isn't quite working? What do you do to kind of rectify when you get stuck in a composite?
That's a great question. So we're going to go ahead and do one of these examples and we can kind of work through that together. So let's go
Great.
ahead and just turn the lighting on at the very end. I just have one more layer that's like a little bit of light and it has some like haze and some atmosphere in there just to make it look like it's actually underwater. So we're going to go ahead and work through like one of these examples. So I want to take this image here. Again, this is a stock photograph here on the left-hand side. So we're going to take this and actually place it into our scene. And we're going to match the light and we're going to match the color. So everything is going to be, we're going to take you through the entire process. So let's go ahead and we're going to start with our move tool up here on the top left, and we're going to click and drag from one image to another. There we go. And as you can see, let's hit F for full screen. Depending on where I bring it into my composite, it's going to show up either in front of things or behind things, because you can see it's actually below my midground right now. Now I can move that forward. If I just bring it up in my layer stack, you can see all of a sudden it's in the front of my image. If I bring it down, all of a sudden it goes, further back down behind some elements in this photograph. So let's go ahead and bring it to the very top to start with. There we go. And we'll just say we want to put it right about there. That looks pretty good. And first thing I want to do is basically start to cut out this coral from the background. Okay. So to cut this out, we're going to start with our magic wand tool. So we can actually try select subject and see what it does. Let's go ahead and click on select subject. You can see in this case, it just selected that coral, but I want more than that selected. So we're going to use our magic wand tool to start. All right,
It's a very nice piece of coral, isn't it?
It's beautiful, right? We're going to use the magic wand tool right over here. And the reason I'm using the magic wand tool is I can click right here and it's going to select similar colors. So in this case, it's basically just selecting blue that's very similar to where I clicked. And it works because it's selecting the blue ocean behind our fish. I'm going to hold shift and click a couple more times. And this is just going to help add to my selection. So when I hit shift, it just, increases the amount of area that's selected. And this is oftentimes how you want to select things in Photoshop. I think, looking at this, you might think, oh, that looks difficult because I have to select each individual fish. Well, what we're doing is actually selecting the opposite of each individual fish. I'm selecting the background and then I can invert my selection very easily. All right.
Makes
Yeah,
sense.
so sometimes it's just way quicker to select the background. So again, I'm just a regular photograph here. I went ahead and made a selection out of each one of these, basically just selecting out the ocean in the background. So I'm going to click here on my layer mask. And right now you can see it actually did the opposite of what we want. So if you ever get the opposite on your layer mask, all you have to do is click here on your layer mask, okay? And you can do a couple things. You can click right here in your contextual taskbar and go to invert mask. There we go. So invert mask, and now everything is visible that we wanted it to be visible. And you can see it did a
Ah,
pretty good job cutting all that stuff out of its background. Like pretty quick and pretty easy. Now I want
that
to
is a
clean
very
this
good
up.
tip.
Yeah, really, really a lot easier than you would think, right? Like it seems like that would take a lot of work, but we were able to do it very quickly. So now we have a little bit, you can see these kind of like little dots that were just kind of left behind by the selection. Let's go ahead and just zoom in so you can see. There we go. Just a couple of stuff that was left behind by the selection. Not a big deal. We're gonna hit L for the lasso tool. Okay, and I'm just gonna make a rough selection right around this area here. There we go. Let's just select all those. And then maybe I'll just go ahead and, make a selection right here. There we go. So I've made this selection here, and I'm going to click on my layer mask, and I'm going to go to Edit, down to Fill, and then we're just going to say to fill this with black. Because if we remember, black on the layer mask means invisible, and white means visible. So if I want these areas to be invisible, I just fill them with black. Now you can use a brush tool to do that. You can make a selection in the fill dialog any way you want to, but there we go. There's, all these little areas that were kind of left over. And then here we go. I filled that with black and we're looking much, much better.
That was
So
so quick.
yeah, nice and easy, right? So I have my layer and I have my layer mask. Now at any time I can update my layer mask. This is non-destructive. I can hold shift and click on my layer mask and I'm back to my original photograph. So we're not in any way deleting any part of the original photograph. We're simply hiding what we don't want with the layer mask. But I could go in, like if I wanted to use the brush tool, I could paint this back at any time just with the brush tool. You can see I'm kind of painting back this area. So it's always there. I can update my layer mask at any time to make sure it works for me. All right, this looks pretty good. I'm overall happy with that. We can see the fish look like they're cut out from the background. Everything's looking pretty good. So the next thing we want to do is maybe just make this a little smaller. So we're going to hit Controller Command T, and we're just going to scale this down a little bit. There we go, something like that. And let's just go ahead and put it, maybe, right about there looks pretty good for now. Let's hit Enter. All right, so this is our coral, and we could even flip the sides and put it on the other side. Let's see, maybe I'll hit Controller Command T. We're going to right click and go to where it says Flip Horizontal at the very bottom. And then it's going to flip it to the other side. And then if I wanted to, I could put it down here. Like if I wanted my coral down here. Actually, I think that looks kind of cool, kind of good. So
I like that, yeah.
let's put the coral down there. And that's going to look just a little bit better. It kind of blends in, and there's already some fish right over there. All right. So with that coral right down here, we're going to think about where should it go in my layers stack. Well, let's go ahead and bring it down a little bit. But we can see as I bring it down, it's getting hidden. So if I wanted to be back there, I could do that. There we go. Or if I wanted to bring it to the foreground, I could just put it right up there to start with. And I could create a couple different ones. So we want to think about the things that are closest to the camera are going to be on the top. Things that are farther from the camera are going to go back down to the bottom. So I could bring it down a little bit and then put it back over here if we wanted to. Okay, or we can bring it to the top. And
So,
you know what? Because
hmm.
did anyone have any questions?
Well, we've got some more people joining. Pinter Production says they love this. Devlin is saying that they let's celebrate. Oh no, we've got puns in chat. Oh dear.
Oh boy.
So it looks like you're allowing yourself quite a bit of freedom to just kind of move things around, playing around with the non-destructibility, and you're not being too rigid with your vision. You're allowing kind of the composition to develop itself almost. You're having some fun with
Exactly.
it.
Yeah, and this is the whole fun of Photoshop and compositing for me is like, well, like let's play around and see how it looks, and zoom in and zoom out and see like where does this work? Where does this add to our composition? And in the early stages of the composition, maybe you'll bring in twice as many photographs as you wind up using, and you can try different things out and see how you like them in different locations, in different positions, serving different functions. So you know what? Let's do two versions of this. I do like this one here in the foreground, but in just a second we'll make a copy of it and we'll put it in the midground, and you can see how you can take the same photograph, put it in a couple locations with different color and light, and it won't look the same at all.
That
All right.
I'm looking forward to.
Fantastic. So let's go ahead and put this in the foreground here. I'm just going to put this right above our fish on the right hand side. I'm going to group this with itself, and we're just going to call this new coral. There we go. I'm going to right click on this little eyeball, and we're just going to make it green so everyone can see exactly where we're working on this new coral right over here. So the first thing that we're going to look at with this new coral is the light. Whenever you're doing a composite, I always recommend first get your lighting to match and then worry about your color. So always do the light first and then do the color. So with the light, we're going to be using levels adjustment layer, and with the color, we're going to be using color balance. Okay, so let's go ahead and show you guys how to do the lighting. So again, this is still the original photograph. I still have all this information intact. I've just got a layer mask on it, and now we're going to adjust the lighting. So we're going to go to layer, down to new adjustment layer here, and we're going to go to levels. So we're going to create a levels adjustment layer. Now, there's an option right here that says use previous layer to create clipping mask. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and check that. We want to make sure that we do check that, and that's going to make sure that this levels adjustment layer, let's go back to our layers here, that's going to make sure that this levels adjustment layer is only going to affect the layer underneath it. Okay, so we can see a regular layer like this. If I do a regular levels adjustment layer, let's go ahead and bring the properties window out so we can see both at the same time. And we'll bring this over here to the left. Okay, so if I have a regular levels adjustment layer and I make this lighter or darker, you're going to see it actually affects the entire image. So right now it's affecting literally the entire photograph. It's affecting everything underneath it. Okay, so this is a regular levels adjustment layer, but if I clip this, now you can clip an adjustment layer or a regular layer using this icon right here. This is your clipping mask icon. So if I clip this, now it's only going to affect the layer that it points to. You can see it moved it over to the side and it's pointing down to the coral. And if I make adjustments here, you can see now it only affects that coral. So I'm able to move these sliders, and it's going to be very, very easy for me to match this with my underlying image. Let's go ahead and reset that. It's going to be very easy for me to match. Look, I can just bring this a little bit darker, and already it's looking so much better. I can bring this a little bit lighter if I want. There we go. Kind of push my midtones up a little bit and bring the lights a little bit darker. There we go. And now the light levels are matching so much better than they were just a minute ago. So I can turn that off and on. There we go. And we're matching much, much better into our composite photo. So if I unclip it, you can see it affects my entire image. But as soon as I clip this again, it's just going to be that area of the photograph.
That is incredible. I did not know you could do that, actually.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
I'm learning so much. I'm
Clipping
quite happy here to just sit and take notes, you guys. Aaron's got this. I'm learning as much as you guys are right now.
Clipping masks are the best. So you can get to them in a variety of ways. The easiest way, you can just right click on a layer and go to, in this case, it's going to say release clipping mask. That's going to undo it. So you can see it's a regular adjustment layer. You can right click and go down to where it says create clipping mask. That's the easiest way to do it. Right click on your layer and go to create clipping mask. There we go. Or if you have an adjustment layer, you're going to have this little icon where you can clip and unclip any adjustment layer. All right.
Really helpful tips there.
Super cool. So we're looking really good. The nicest thing about this is it's non-destructive. You can turn this off and on. You can change these values at any time. So it really helps with compositing. So the next thing we're going to do a color balance. So let's go to layer, down to new adjustment layer, and we're going to go over to where it says color balance. And again, let's choose our color as green. Use previous layer to create clipping mask. I'm going to go ahead and check that. I want to make sure that's checked because we want to create a clipping mask there. So we'll hit OK. You can see it went ahead and created a new color balance adjustment layer, and it has this little down arrow letting us know it's clipped, and all of these are pointing down to the layer that it actually affects. So this levels adjustment layer is affecting just the coral, and this color balance adjustment layer is also affecting just the coral. There we go.
Marsha's actually asking if you always adjust light first and then color.
Always. For my personal preference. The reason I do it is because like color and light actually do affect each other a little bit. And you'll notice that if you try to adjust all of your like color first and then the light, you might have to redo a little bit of your coloring or vice versa. I suppose it doesn't necessarily matter the order that you do it in, but I find it's always better to do the light first and then the color. Now, I do want to give you one really, really helpful tip before we do anything with the lighting color. You know what? Let's just turn this adjustment layer on and I'm going to reset it. Okay, so here's a very, very helpful tip to adjust your lighting, because it can be quite difficult sometimes to know if your layer should be lighter or darker, or if the highlights should be lighter or darker, the shadows, whatever it is like that. So a very, very helpful tip that I have is I will temporarily make my image black and white while I'm adjusting the lighting. Okay, very easy to do. We'll go to layer, down to new adjustment layer, and to black and white. All right, we're gonna hit OK, and I'm just gonna put that on the very top of everything. All right, so I just have a black and white adjustment layer. I can turn this off and on at any time. It's not gonna be on there permanently, but it allows me to see my image in black and white. And when it's in black and white, now it's very obvious that the highlights in this coral are way too bright. So I'm not looking at color at all right now. I'm just looking at light values, and it helps me to understand why, like what I need to do with my light values to make this blend in. And if you can get your light values to look like they blend in, then you can get your color values to look good. But if your lighting is off, then your color will never look good. So I really do recommend doing your lighting first and then your coloring. It's not necessary, but you can see, like if you had this the perfect color, it still wouldn't look good because you can see the light value is way off. It's just way too bright, right? So now with this image in black and white, we've determined that the coral here is too bright. The highlights are too bright. So I can take this levels adjustment layer. We just made this. Again, I just reset this, so we're just going to do it again. I can take my light values, which is this little slider here on the bottom. So with levels adjustment layers, you've got two sliders. You've got your slider at the top that has your black point, your midpoint, and your white point. And then you've got a slider at the bottom, which is your black point defining how dark your darks are. And then you have your white point, which defines how light your light points are. So we'll kind of show you these little sliders real quick. Let's just zoom into this coral just a little bit here. So if I bring this point here on the very left, it's going to make my darks darker. You can see that there. It's making everything that's dark even darker. Okay. On the right hand side, it's going to make my lights even lighter. There we go. Now on the bottom here, this guy is going to make my darks lighter. So you can see the darkest point is actually getting lighter. And on the right hand side, it's going to make my lights darker, which is actually what needs to happen here. And as my lights get darker, you can see it starts to blend in. Ah, okay, cool. That looks like it actually belongs there now. They were too bright before. We're going to make them a little bit darker. And now right about there, all of a sudden it looks like it belongs. It looks like it should be there. And with this image in black and white, I don't have to think about my color at all, but now I know my lighting matches. And if you get your lighting to match, then you have a good chance of being able to get your color to match. But if your lighting doesn't match, no matter what you do with the color, it's still not going to look right. So a big tip here, and lighting, I find I can do everything that I need with just a levels adjustment layer. So you can see simple levels adjustment layer. I was able to bring my highlights just a little bit darker. right about there, looking really good. And all of a sudden it blends in perfectly to my image, and that's what we want.
We've got just about 5 minutes left, and you guys have gotten so much value out of this. Admittedly, it feels very short stream now. We started at the top
I
of the hour
know.
thinking we got 60 minutes, and now we've only got 5 minutes left. So if you guys do have any more questions, do feel free to drop them in the chat. But you can also get a huge amount of value out of Aaron from Phlearn.com as
Yes.
well, where you can learn, where you actually have this composition. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I teach you how to create this entire image from start all the way to finish, and that's available on Phlearn.com as a part of a pro subscription. And you also get access to over 10 years of course material. And we have hundreds and hundreds of free videos on YouTube as well. So whether you're watching us on YouTube or Phlearn.com, we can help you out at any level with Photoshop. So let's go ahead and finish this up. I'm going to take my black and white adjustment layer. We're just going to turn that off a little bit, but you can see it already looks good. And now we're going to work on our color with our color balance. So I'm going to take our midtones. We're just going to push them towards cyan a little bit and towards blue a little bit. There we go. And now I'm actually coloring this to match the color of the entire image. So I'm going to take my highlights. We'll just push those a little bit. Maybe take a little bit of blue out of the highlights. There we go. And we'll work with our shadows. There we go. That's looking fantastic. And you can see overall, I didn't do a ton of work with my layer mask. Basically, the majority of how I'm able to get this to blend in with the rest of the image is just through these layers. So let's go ahead and turn these off and then re-enable our layer mask. Let's go ahead. We'll just close our properties window right now to make it bigger there. So we have a layer mask, a levels adjustment layer, and a color balance adjustment layer. And that is all you need to get your images to blend together so you can create fantastic composites just like this. There we go.
That
All done.
was so easy. I mean, well, you made it look easy. I'm sure it's, well, I know
easy.
it's not easy, but like I mentioned, we do have Phlearn.com and Aaron will be about as well. We actually have quite a few fans of yours, although I'm not too surprised at all. Pinter Production says that Aaron, you saved their lives a few times with your tutorials when they were first starting out, which is,
amazing.
It must be quite, I don't know, the sort of feeling knowing you've helped so many people get started to pursue the passion that you have as well, right?
Yeah, I really appreciate everyone. It's been the joy of my life being able to meet people from all around the world and make new friends in unexpected situations. So yeah, I really appreciate everyone tuning in today, and thanks so much for watching from the beginning. It means a lot.
We have been so lucky to have you here, and I have learned so much. I'm going to open Photoshop in a little bit myself and start messing around with my own images. But please do stay around, guys. Just after us, we have Arabella Espinoza and Ellie Mott showing you how easy it is to incorporate fun and colorful gradient backgrounds into your photography in Photoshop as well. So we've got a bit of a Photoshop theme going on this lovely day of love. Do we have any other questions before we get going? Otherwise, we might leave you there. Oh, Penny has heard of Phlearn too. Marsha says thank you. Carol says thank you. We're getting lots of, oh, Apurva and Chris. Phlearn is great. Learning from the
Amazing.
best. All the love
Thank you guys
on
so
Valentine's Day. We love to see
I feel
it. Well, thank you so much for joining us, guys. Make sure you check out the rest of the streams that are happening today, and we will be seeing you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.